Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Today we're on the estate planning of the rich and famous topic, and for the episode today, we are going to dive into what has happened following the death of Tina Turner, who should need absolutely no introduction in my opinion. And I was actually going to start the intro music to this episode with her song Proud Mary, but I'm not that fancy. I don't know how to do that without putting probably too much time into it. So sorry about you guys getting this same old intro music as always, when I could have started it with Proud Mary. Anyway, so obviously Tina was a singer. She did do a little acting too, which I kind of forgot about, to be honest. But many call her the Queen of Rock and Roll. Her passing was not long ago, like maybe about a month or so ago. And honestly, I thought discussing her family setup and family dynamic would be just a really great follow-up to last week's Legal Tea episode, which talked about blended families, because that will likely be a hot topic in Tina's estate. So before we dive into her estate stuff, let's talk a little bit about Tina first as a person, just to understand who she, was, her family, etc. So I'm actually going to kick things off with a little bit of a fun fact. According to her Wikipedia page, Tina Turner was not the name she was born with. She was actually born Anna Mae Bullock on November 26, 1939 in Brownsville, Tennessee. She had a little bit of a rocky family setup when she was a child. Like, while her parents were together when she was born, they did end up separating. And her mom actually left without notice and just booked it to St. Louis. Her dad ended up remarrying and moving to Detroit. So with those changes, Tina and her siblings moved in with their mother's mom, so their grandmother, and they were able to remain for that reason in Brownsville, Tennessee. Though the rockiness did not end there, because when Tina was only 16 years old, that grandmother, the one she was living with, passed away. So she ended up having to uproot and move to St. Louis at that point. In the late 1950s, Tina and her sister began hitting the nightclub scene in St. Louis, and that is where and when she met Ike Turner, who would later become her first husband. Tina and Ike crossing paths really is what started Tina's career in music. Not only did she become a vocalist in Ike's band, which was called the Kings of Rhythm, but her and Ike ended up becoming quite a duo, and they released several huge hits. They ended up getting married in 1962, though things, including their music, came to a screeching halt in the 1970s when there was a little bit of trouble in paradise in their marriage. In mid-1976, on a flight from LA to Dallas, Ike and Tina got into a physical altercation after landing in Dallas, and according to her Wikipedia page, quote, Tina fled from Ike with only 36 cents and a mobile gas card and later hid at the Ramada Inn across the freeway, end quote. That happened on July 1st, 1976, and by the end of that July, Tina filed divorce, which ended up becoming final, the divorce was finalized in early 1978. Then the early 1980s hit, and she made a heck of a comeback. She put her head down, got to work, and rebounded beautifully. She started by doing some TV shows like Hollywood Squares, The Sonny and Cher Show, Donnie and Marie, Saturday Night Live, etc. And she also ended up releasing a few albums, which actually, a couple of them didn't receive a ton of attention, but some did as well. She also ended up signing with Capitol Records, and finally, in 1984, she hit it big. Her song, What's Love Got to Do With It, hit number 1 on the Billboard. And from there, things just really started moving and grooving for her. For example, the 27th annual Grammy Awards, Tina brought home 3 Grammys, including the Record of the Year for that song, What's Love Got to Do With It. So really in the 1980s, her solo career just peaked. This is also when she ended up meeting Erwin Bach, who was a German music executive, and after 27 years of a relationship, they actually ended up getting married in mid-2013 in Switzerland. Tina was also a mother. She had 2 biological sons, Raymond, who she did not have with Ike, and Ronnie, who she did have with Ike, and also two children that she adopted who were biological kids of Ike, her first husband. And their names were, their names are Ike Turner Jr. And Michael. So Ike actually adopted Raymond, since again, Raymond was not his biological child, but Tina's biological child, and they changed his name to Craig Raymond. But tragically in 2018, Craig passed away due to an apparent suicide. According to her Wikipedia page, after time passed and life happened, quote, Ike Turner Jr. stated that he and his brothers have a distant relationship with their mother, end quote. And it further shared that, quote, Tina wrote in her autobiography that after her divorce, she became a little estranged from all of her sons except for Craig, end quote. So it seems that their family setup and dynamic became a little bit strained after the divorce happened and after life happened, to be honest. Beginning in 1978, Tina's health really was not the greatest. She battled high blood pressure, which ultimately became problematic to her kidneys. And in 2013, she had a stroke and had to learn to walk again. And in 2016, she was diagnosed with intestinal cancer. So, needless to say, she was put through the ringer. And eventually, her husband at the time, Erwin Bach, donated his kidney to her in 2017. Though, even though he did that, her life came to an end in May 2023 when she died in her home in Switzerland at the age of 83 years old. At the time of her passing, her total estate was estimated to be worth around $250 million, according to CelebrityNetWorth.com. Sadly, before I dive into the estate stuff, Tina's son Ronnie, which is the son she shared with Ike Turner, passed away less than 6 months before she passed away. And, in my brain as an estate attorney, that may pose an issue. Like whether it gets settled quickly or not, I don't know. But it may pose an issue in Tina's estate because oftentimes in estate planning, there are provisions in place for what happens if a beneficiary either passes away before you or even after you, especially when it's like a short period of time. So this could become something that is dealt with because Tina's only biological grandchildren came from Ronnie. Those 2 grandchildren's names are Randy and Raquel. So those are Ronnie's living children. So Tina's biological grandchildren. So now that Ronnie has passed away, we'll have to see if Randy and Raquel are entitled to anything from Tina's estate. What this all means is that Tina's 2 biological sons, Craig Raymond and Ronnie, have both predeceased her, which leaves her 2 adopted sons, Ike Jr. and Michael, as the possible beneficiaries, along with her husband, Erwin Bach, of course, which is a little bit ironic, right? It's ironic because those closest family-wise to Tina at Tina's passing are her husband, Erwin, her 2 grandchildren, Randy and Raquel, which there are claims that she never met or even maybe barely knew them, and her 2 sons that she adopted from her first husband, Ike Jr. and Michael. So that's a lot to keep track of. I actually found a handy-dandy little family tree on the page 6 article that I have linked in the source links for this episode. So if you're totally confused on who the heck is who, check that article out. They have like a little helpful image diagram thing. They also have a lot of really great pictures, like young pictures to put faces to names. Like there's an adorable picture of the 4 boys when they were young. When I say 4 boys, I meant Tina's 4 sons, both biologically and adopted. So according to the Page Six article, even though Ronnie has passed away, his wife, Afida, is still kind of in the picture with the family and what's going on. And she shared that it is said that Tina's second husband, Erwin, will be inheriting half of Tina's hefty estate. When asked about who would inherit the rest, Afida said it really was not clear. All of that was reported in late May, early June 2023. So as we sit here today in late June, there's really not an absolute ton that has hit the news, and that's really happened. But so far, things seem to be okay and seem to be fine. I did read a few times through my research for this episode that because of Tina Turner's not great health for several years leading up to her death, she really began to tie up loose ends and was actively trying to get her estate to a place that would really minimize or eliminate family fighting and family drama. I so hope that happened. And I hope that things are spelled out so beautifully that it's just a matter of merely following the instructions that she left. Though, because she passed away just about a month ago, this cynical part of my brain says, oh, just wait, Jenny, there will be something eventually that blows up. So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. Now, I don't know if you've listened to the episode on here on Betty White, but following Betty White's passing, her estate honestly stayed out of the news. And as an estate planning attorney, that makes me think things were on lockdown and things were or are being administered privately without being blasted all over the news and blasted online. And that is so wonderful for the estate and for the family, right? That tells me that Betty White not only had probably a solid plan, but she must have carefully and proactively set things up to stay out of the news. So with that being said, I'm crossing my fingers that will be the case for Tina's estate too. Granted, it's only been about a month, but about now is when things would start popping up in the news, like so-and-so files a will contest for Tina Turner's estate for XYZ reason. But nothing has happened so far, which is awesome, right? But time will tell. If Tina's estate stays calm and out of the news and no drama breaks out, I'll be so happy. Because with her blended family, without careful planning and many conversations, a family setup and dynamic like that is often ripe for disagreement. So before I sign off for this episode, as I said in the beginning of this episode, this episode came as, how many times can I say episode in 30 seconds? Actually, more like 10 seconds. This came as a beautiful follow-up to my episode last week. And last week we talked about comparing families like the Cleavers in Leave It to Beaver and families like on Modern Family, and specifically how the family in Modern Family is much more normal nowadays. So while Tina's family setup may seem a little unique to some, it's really not unique. I can confirm I'm an estate planning attorney who has to dive deep into family setup and dynamic all the time. And I can confirm that is in fact, a modern family setup is actually quite normal nowadays. And it's absolutely critical that families like on Modern Family and families like Tina Turner that they have a solid estate plan in place. If not, things are much more likely to result in hurt feelings, disagreements, and maybe even estate litigation where there's fighting with lawyers involved. So if you have a family that is not like the Cleavers, if you're much more like Modern Family or much more like Tina Turner, please, #do your estate plan. Alrighty, I think we're ready to wrap this episode up. Next week, we are back to a cautionary tale episode where we talk about real-life cases, real-life clients that I or my office have worked on. So during that episode, we're going to go into a story about a gentleman who's in his early 60s. Unfortunately, he had a massive stroke and now requires significant care. So even though it seems really young to be discussing Medicaid, we are seeking Medicaid to cover his long-term care expenses. And on top of all of that, he had no estate planning done. So his poor 80-year-old mother stepped in to help navigate the often treacherous process of Medicaid. And it just feels like everything that has gone wrong for them, it's happened. They just cannot catch a break. But some of the things that have gone wrong could have totally been avoided with some estate planning. So tune in for that next week. But until then, please take care and please be well.